Okay, here we are, ready to get into the working example for the legs. This is going to take you through the development of the legs from z-spheres, where we're going to start this week, because really our topological requirements are fairly simple. Okay, so I'm not going to spend really any time on this. We're just really getting generating a mesh to begin with. And what I've done is I've used classic skinning to just get a really blocky representation. It's slightly lower res at density 1 than the standard skinning. And so really I just get a block of polygons, a nice tall cube, rectangle of polygons. A cylinder maybe work just as well. In fact, you could use a native cylinder in ZBrush, except for it has really strange triangle topology at the top, so I've gone with a little z-sphere tower. Okay, and so from here, this is just the simplest case of pulling the edge loops around, just pulling vertex by vertex to get some of the contours of the legs. And this is kind of going to be the profile here of the leg. Knee would be out here, gluteal region in here, iliac crest. So to orient you, that's how things are going to proceed. Flattening up the bottom, and I'm getting ready to just to stump this and make it into a fragment. So I'm going to crease up here, kind of through the iliac crest, and then I'm also going to crease on the inside of the legs. Right, so this is creased, this is the front view now, so the knee would be here, and this is the iliac crest. Right, and actually I've used a little trick that we learned in the arm, or in the hand week, and I've done my first couple subdivisions with smooth off. Right, so I've turned smooth off and I've done a subdivision to keep a little bit of the square shape to the legs. And so one subdiv, you'll see that it's kind of still blocky and not a perfect tube like you would get if you did a pure Catmull-Clark subdiv. Subsequently, I turned smooth on and increased my resolution. Okay, I think I went up to level 7 for this exercise, which is a pretty light mesh, really. I think it may even be under 100,000 polys. I don't quite remember. Okay, so now, really, I'm just going to start to put something on the surface, right? And I've started with the patella, as good as any, I suppose. And this really is just going to give us some way to orient our other forms. And you'll see I'm going to be very kind of schematic at the start. Knowing this is my anterior superior iliac spine, I'm just putting some clay tubes in place to delineate the boundaries of what I need to establish. I talked about this in the intro lecture, to just really get an idea of where the things are that I need to put in. So it's going to be schematic to start with, and then I'm going to correct and work the volumes in. Okay, early on I've noticed that my knee is way too low, so I've really just started freestyling, and I'm going to have to move that up. So this is me moving it up a tiny bit. I pulled up the reference just to have it on screen. Typically I'll have it on another monitor, but it's nice to just have it in the ZBrush window as well for these kind of reviews. Okay, here we go. So let me just go talk about these things as we go, because I'm missing a few things. In the front here, you can see the tibial tuberosity. This is kind of the front of the shin and the tibial plateau. I've started to block in some of the common tendon that I've talked about, and this is for better or worse how I proceed. And it's really just going to give me the boundaries that I need to set up my forms. You can even see a little bit of the tensor fascia latae coming down here. Okay, going to the side, I'm getting the lateral block of the vastus lateralis in. Look at this, just one stroke for the tendon of the biceps femoris initially. Line across for the top plateau of the tibia. And now I'm looking to block in the two heads of the gastrocnemius going up into the upper leg, right? And here's the full body of the larger medial head of the gastrocnemius, right? This is the inside of the knee here. So this is going to be nice and fatty eventually. Okay, other things I've just carved out with a stroke or two this nice gesture of the curve of the tibia, and this is going to be the little slot where the gastrocnemius and soleus sit in. Okay, a little bit of rectus femoris going in, taking it up, going to border it with the sartorius, and adductors, right? The mass of the adductors going in. So you can see now I know where things are going to be, and now I'm just trying to get them to be the right shape. Okay, the teardrop of the vastus medialis is going in, bordering right up against the sartorius. As we know, I talked about this in the anatomy review. And really, at this point, I am kind of sculpting half what I know and half what I see, or probably actually more, 75% what I know, and just keeping my eye on the reference. And once things are in place structurally, then I can adjust it proportionally and get it into the right space for matching the reference. Although we're not going for a full, beautiful, 100% perfect match this week because I don't think we have enough reference for that, to be honest. Okay, gluteal muscles. Again, we've seen this, talked about this in the introduction lecture. All this big wheel, we have the depression in here where the tendinous part of the gluteus maximus is, greater trochanter sitting in front. I put a few strokes in here just to start to build up that plane change where we have this kind of fold of the buttocks down here, and then we have another kind of fatty plane change in here before we get down to the volume of the hamstrings. Okay, there's the mass of the hamstrings going in, literally just a little convex egg. So you can see a lot of what I'm doing here is just starting to refine the volumes. I'm observing a little bit more of the reference and seeing that this guy has huge quadricep muscles, so we really need to do some work on those. I blocked in the tensor fasciae latae, not because I see it explicitly in the reference, because it doesn't really pop out too much, but you can see in this particular view that there is a little indication of the tensor fasciae latae, because it does, especially in this pose, help to stabilize the leg and balance the body. Okay, working into the quadriceps tendon now, and starting to look at some of the nuances of the shapes in here. And you're going to see me do a lot of refinement to this over the course of the sculpt. So this will do a lot of things going forward. Just keep an eye on this. So working up the knee. Remember, the knee, the patella, the area of the patella is going to be roughly bone in here. You're going to have some tendinous merging above in here, right? So this part of the patella gets kind of encased in tendon, right? So it's not pure bone. It becomes kind of a hybrid. And then down below we have fatty forms bulging in and around here. And then tendinous forms, a slack, kind of a ligament with skin over it going down. Okay, so that's what I'm building in. Nothing remarkable about what's going on here. I'm just starting to change these from being explicitly drawn to more subtle plane changes, right? So I'm going from graphic carved in clay tubes boundaries to a shift in the planes, right? So it's a little bit of smoothing over these areas and just starting to make it kind of unify as a whole. This is a little bit of the medial condyle of the femur. Sits right in here, but in fact this is actually going to get subdued a lot by the end of the sculpt because there's a big kind of joint capsule that sits over it, so it's pretty well packed in there, so you don't see it too explicitly, but I've got it in as an indication to start with. Now, getting a lot of the fat, well, a lot of the soft volume anyways, through the inside of the knee, and really being careful and quite explicit at this point to set up this nice boundary between the adductors, adductor tendon, hamstring tendons, and then the gastrocnemius going up behind, right? So again, keep your eye out for that really graceful gesture. Okay, heads of the gastrocnemius, and starting to look at some of the soleus down there as well. Look at that. A little X marks the spot for the head of the fibula. Bam, 1, 2 strokes. Literally a little pirate map to get this tendon going to the right place. Right, so straight down to the head of the fibula. And now you'll see that I've set up this plane change. We have the volume of the vastus lateralis, and we have the tendon slightly recessed, but this whole area that's quite flat right now is actually going to fill in with some convexity, which is, as we know, kind of the short head of the biceps femoris sits in here, and the long head is coming off in the back and becomes fairly tubular, actually. Okay. So a little bit more of this going in. What you just saw with this form is pretty much the iliotibial band, right? The fascia lata going down to this little area of the tibia, okay? And this is again going to be subdued a little bit. It's not going to remain so explicit, but I've indicated it, and you can make out a small form of that in the reference. Okay, you'll see when I go to these really oblique views, I'm looking at contour lines, right? I have my polyframe on most of the time because I want to assess contours. And when you have a nice rectilinear layout of your base mesh, then you can really easily assess the roundness of the shapes when you kind of look on a very foreshortened angle, right? And so here I realized that he's quite square, you know, from front to back, which is still, it's a little bit of a vestige of the way we started with a non-smooth subdivision. So I've just popped that up a little bit to make it a bit rounder, and continuing to assess the planes and the roundness. Okay, I've put it in, and I've just taken off, subtly taken off a little bit of that change that I put in. I've blocked in a little bit of subtlety to the rectus femoris in here, right? So we can't see it explicitly, but this casting subtle plane changes and shadows in the reference. So that's enough to convince me that we have to have some representation of it. Okay, what you see now is tibialis anterior going in. Okay, we have, again, it's a big mass. It actually accounts for a lot of the form of the anterior surface, anterior lateral surface of the lower leg. And remember, it comes right up to this nice bony arc of the tibia. Tibial tuberosity comes down and lines up with the tibialis anterior, right? And in fact, in profile, the tibialis anterior is convex enough that it establishes the front of the profile of the lower leg. So this would be tibialis anterior right here, coming in front of the shin, right? For the calves, I think I mentioned this in the video. I literally am just freestyling it in because his calves aren't nearly this big. So at some point further along the line, I'm going to be looking at this and say, hey, I need to actually match this a little better, but not yet. Okay, right here, I'm just popping out with a standard brush some of the volume in the peroneus longus, right, coming down from the head of the fibula, just because we need to have a little bit more convexity back here. Bouncing around, seeing what needs to improve. And I think most of the forms are pretty well in place right now, so it's going to be a process of subtle refinement from here forward. Tweaking volumes, tweaking small plane changes. You can see, in general, when I'm starting to tweak, my view is really close to the form, and my brush size is generally pretty small. So I get in there and make smaller changes. You can't see the actual radius here, but relative to the surface is pretty small. So refining this nice transition. Remember the way these two things interact, gastrocnemius and the tibia. Okay, looking at the volume through here, and then a little bit of this extension of the vastus intermedius, right? I haven't said much about that because it's the mysterious fourth head of the quadriceps that only shows just a sliver down at the bottom where it actually kind of mates with the side of the patella. Just step back really quick. What you've seen here is me just flatten off the side plane, which is that region that I've alluded to in the lecture video of the where the iliotibial band and the fascia latae really lashes down the vastus lateralis and creates a little plane change. Just more refining. Again, trying to soften some of the transitions. Refining the head of the fibula. Bulking out a little bit the biceps femoris. Kind of going through this at full speed, just so you guys can see. It's just subtle tweaks from here forward, really. Being very careful about describing this, right? Vastus lateralis, little bite for the rectus femoris coming down, and then vastus medialis coming in here. You see that I've moved my light to really just illuminate some of this convexity here, because with a front view, you won't necessarily get the roundness and really be able to tell. So tweak your lights as you need to. Softening off some of the bottom of the gastrocnemius and soleus. And in fact, this is too low and this one is too high. This will change towards the end, right? Generally, the medial head is lower. I've lost my way, but I'll correct it going forward. Softening surfaces. And this is, at this point, I'm looking a little bit more closely at the reference to try to get some of the forms to match up. So really, I'm looking at this right here in this. The one thing that I haven't done, and I should note this, is that the leg in the reference is bearing all the weight in a funny sort of pose, and so it's quite it has a strong diagonal to it against vertical. And my leg, I've kind of left it upright, right, and just tried to capture the gesture with the leg straight up. That was my personal decision. If you guys want to go for the full gesture of the leg, that's up to you. I just, in the context of the fragment, it didn't make any sense for me, so I left it straight. So really starting to get specific about what's happening on the tendon, right? We have, if you look at it, we have tendon coming down, and then we have subtle convexity here. And you can see it with a little highlight on that surface. And a lot of this looks like me resculpting things that I've already sculpted, but this is what refining is about, right? So just kind of making changes, and as you refine and get more and more subtle, hopefully it gets tighter and tighter. But sometimes you lose a little bit of the raw quality that you have when you have just a sketch. So sometimes it's a trade-off, but hopefully you go to a good place as you refine and don't over model things. This is the point where things get over modeled. When you're focusing on the micro details, you know, when you get in close and you're really worrying about this sort of thing, often that's when you can make this too big in the context of the larger planes. And that's what over modeling is. It's focusing too closely on one thing in isolation and not setting it into the larger whole. Okay, forward and forward, filling in the fat. I'm just going to play this forward at regular speed and just make a comment when necessary. It is literally just refining right now. One thing that's interesting is I've hit this with a very kind of raking light, so illuminating almost very harshly vertically down the surface. And when you're getting into your refinement stage, this is how you really tell what the convexities are of a surface. And it's a good way to look out for any subtle undulations that might be popping up and creating funny forms. And so actually, I had a little bit of funny stuff going on in the surface here. So I've hit it with a hard light and am just really looking to unify the planes. Practically nothing is happening. I'm doing a lot of strokes, but nothing is really changing, is it? That's what sculpting is about sometimes. I seriously could have stopped about 5 minutes ago and just gone with that, but you guys get a sense of what I'm like when I need to refine something. It can sometimes get silly. Okay, a quick turntable. I will see a few things turntabling this that I don't like. Hit it with harder light, turntable it another time. And let's see what I don't like. Change a little gesture and volume of the calf muscles. A little bit of proportional change. Literally, I think these are kind of reference tweaks, looking at the reference to really get it tight. And finally, we're getting close to the end when I'm starting to worry about the surface of my fragment, right? So I'm just bringing the polish brush in and tightening that up. Because, hey, it has to look good as well. And the bottom is kind of too concave, so I'm just going to flatten that out. And that brings us to the end. So here's the final leg. We talked a lot about bending this in the next video. So we're going to take this and we're going to transpose it into a leg at 90 degrees, and we'll see how we do that in an actual real-time video. Okay, so I hope this this quick time-lapse walkthrough was useful to get you started on the standing leg. Literally, it is just taking a simple mesh and refining and refining. Follow along with this. Put your boundaries in as you go. Right? I really want to see you guys get this kind of stuff explicitly carved in to start with, and that will really set you up to assess and change volumes and proportions. So good luck with this, and I will see you in the next videos. Thanks.